Lured to a Japan he hasn't seen since World War II, century-old mutant Wolverine finds himself in a shadowy realm of Yakuza and samurai. Wolverine is pushed to his physical and emotional brink when he is forced to go on the run with a powerful industrialist's daughter and is confronted, for the first time, with the prospect of death. As he struggles to rediscover the hero within himself, he must grapple with powerful foes and the ghost of his own haunted past. This is 2013's The Wolverine.
Unqualified morons and microphones. This is the previously recorded podcast.
Alright, welcome back to another episode of Previously Recorded. I am your host, RP, as always, and today we're discussing The Wolverine. And since this is Wolverine's solo, truly solo movie, I figured why not just make this a truly solo episode. So it is just me here today, continuing the Fox Marvel universe rewatch as we lead into this month's Deadpool and Wolverine. And yes, you may be saying, oh, well, these have been bi-weekly. How come we're weekly? It's because we're weekly this month only, just to get you ready for Deadpool and Wolverine. So giving you everything you need truly to kind of fully understand, because Deadpool and Wolverine takes place before Logan, as they've explained in the trailers. So you will have had everything you need in this rewatch before the release of Deadpool and Wolverine. So X-Men Origins, Wolverine, the X-Men trilogy, and then this film. And then I believe that is it for where it picks up. Maybe Days of Future Past plays an element into that, but it from what I've seen in the trailers for Wolverine, like in the Deadpool movie, mainly because of the hairstyle, this should be everything that you truly need, just because it definitely takes place before Logan. They've said that. So if not, maybe jump ahead of us. But just to get you ready for Deadpool and Wolverine, will be the Wolverine episode. And then next week you'll have Deadpool 2 leading into the release of Deadpool and Wolverine. So, without further ado, let's kind of hop into this 2013 film, and I'm going to take you through the backstory, budget, all that fun stuff, and then kind of my thoughts on the film, and maybe share some fun Letterboxd reviews that I found. So, this was released on July 26, 2013, which is 4 years after the release of X-Men Origins Wolverine. This is directed by James Mangold, and by this point he had done Kate and Leopold, a Hume movie, and Night and Day starring Tom Cruise, Cameron Diaz, 3:10 to Yuma remake, and then Walk the Line, which is a personal favorite of mine. I love that. I haven't seen Night and Day or 3:10 to Yuma, but I've heard great things. I haven't seen Kate and Leopold either. So, but I've seen his other movies that have come out since, which is Logan. He did Indy 5, Ford and Ferrari. So yeah, no, I love James Mangold. I think he's got a lot of talent. And I think it's definitely seen in this movie. This one was written by Mark Baumbach and Scott Frank. So Baumbach has gone on to write Dawn and War for the Planet of the Apes. So that's why that name is familiar to me, because I really enjoy those movies, and I just finished a rewatch with the new one coming out, which the new one was a pretty solid start to a new franchise. And then by this point, Scott Frank had only written Marley and Me and then Tom Cruise's Minority Report. Interesting pull, but yeah, whatever. So the budget for this movie was around $120 million, and it went on to gross $414.8 million with an opening weekend of $53.1 million. So at this point, it was the lowest. This is the lowest opening in X-Men in the franchise. I believe Dark Phoenix comes in under this too, but so it did make a profit, and domestically it did earn it back its budget, but it still came in short by about $40 million of the domestic average of the X-Men franchise to that point. But overseas, it came in $75 million over average. So clearly there's still an audience for the X-Men films, for Wolverine, and to see more stories with these characters. So the critical response to this one was much more favorable than the previous Wolverine film. It was 71 on Rotten Tomatoes, with the consensus saying Although its final act succumbs to the usual cartoonish antics, the Wolverine is one superhero movie that manages to stay true to the comics while keeping casual viewers entertained. And just noting that it's a significant improvement on the previous solo Wolverine film. So that's kind of the overview of the big facts. Let's get into development, pre-production, all that fun stuff. So prior to the release of Origins Wolverine, director Gavin Hood had discussed potential sequel plans, which would have been set in Japan, taking inspiration from Claremont and Miller's 1982 limited series run. As I've talked about, almost all of these X-Men movies have been based off of or centered around at least some point of Chris Claremont's run. So the idea was scrapped from Origins because Jackman wanted to focus on who Logan was and what drove him to become the Wolverine. And you can go on to argue that they probably could have just used this movie, put it earlier, and it been better. Like, just, I know obviously the adamantium claws and everything, but there's a lot of really good character stuff with Wolverine in this movie that I'll get to it later. But Hugh Jackman did add that this Japan-based story is his favorite Wolverine story from the comics. Jackman even told Kevin Durant, who played the Blob in X-Men Origins and is kind of making a little bit of a resurgence with Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, that he wanted the Blob to return in the sequel since he was in the wrestling camp in Japan in that storyline. So Hugh, since back when Origins came out, wanted to eventually adapt this, but didn't want it in Origins. So obviously it didn't happen due to the response of Origin, and even though a sequel for Origins was greenlit, despite the bad reviews because it made a ton of money. But on the DVD release of Origins, there is a deleted post-credit scene of Logan in a Japanese bar, which I believe I talked about in that episode. So Darren Aronofsky, who has done The Wrestler, The Whale, the Academy Award-winning film for Brendan Fraser, The Whale, Requiem for a Dream, was originally attached to direct this film with Christopher McQuarrie from the Mission Impossible films. So McQuarrie was going to do the screenplay, and in McQuarrie's version, Wolverine was the only mutant in the movie. So it would have been, I think, not a continuation, but kind of just like a one-off, like we talked about in the Deadpool episode, where they wanted to do kind of like a one-off originally. So back in 2012, McQuarrie coined it Kurosawa's Wolverine, obviously the famous director Kurosawa, and stated that it was the script he was most proud of up until that moment in 2012. So they were aiming for a darker, more character-driven piece, something that Hugh attempted to do with Origins. So in 2010, it was decided that this was no longer be a sequel to Origins. It would now be a one-off, giving them more freedom and distancing from the response and reception and kind of just overall hate that Origins has. So as they began to further develop the film, it became clear that Aronofsky had signed on for something larger than he originally thought, and this kind of tends to happen. While most of the production would have taken place outside the U.S., Aronofsky left the project because he didn't want to be away from his family for too long, which I guess is understandable. And then just with the 2011 tsunami that hit Japan, Fox slowed down production and began to look for a new director. So it wasn't until the following year, in May of 2011, that Fox hired James Mangold, and filming was set to begin in November, but again was delayed until 2012 due to Hugh filming Les Mis. So then Foster and Baumbach joined at this point, when Mangold had already been hired, to rewrite the script with Mangold's help. So he did a pass on the script and beefed up the female roles intentionally, saying that they all have missions, they all have jobs to do other than being the object of affection, with the intent of avoiding the worn-out trope of, like the woman in jeopardy. And again, I'll get into it when we get there, but that is clearly seen in this film. So here is where it was determined that the film would ignore the events of X-Men Origins. So they just kind of decided to ignore the Origins. They decided to ignore X-Men Origins, but they hadn't decided if it was going to be a one-off, a continuation, so on and so forth. So this is when it was decided, this deep into production, that it would just be a continuation of X3, The Last Stand, where Wolverine, Logan, is dealing with Jean's death. and like that he had to do it. So they originally intended for the film to be R-rated, but this was something that Hugh didn't want with Origins. So they were going for this darker, grittier, more adult-based. And it's a character that truly lends itself to an R rating. So that was the original intent. So in terms of his character, Jackman views Wolverine as the ultimate outsider, and that the great battle he always thought was with Wolverine is actually the battle within himself. So regarding Logan's struggle with extreme longevity, like his life, Jackman said he realizes everybody he loves dies, and his whole life is just full of pain. So it's better that he just escapes. He can't die, so he just wants to get away from everything, and this is where we see Wolverine in the beginning of the film. So one of the things about this film specifically that I remember is that this was probably the most ripped Hugh Jackman got for a role. Of all the Wolverines, I think Steven still to this point, this is the most shredded he got. So he stated that he ate 6 meals a day in preparation for this, and that he contacted The Rock for some tips on bulking up for the film, suggesting that he gain a pound a week by eating 6,000 calories a day for 6 months, which consisted of an awful lot of chicken, steak, and brown rice. And that's like the one thing I remember. Why I remember this is because when they were done filming on the press junket, Hugh Jackman just said, "I just can't wait to eat lasagna." Because the man, apparently that's his favorite meal. And obviously on these strict diets, you're not allowed to eat stuff like that. So that's like, it's weird that I remember that, but that's like the one thing I remember from the promotion of this film. So following the release of the film, it was in October 2013, that Fox began negotiating with Mangold and Jackman to return for another film and set the release for March 2017. And this film and its tone, along with the success of Deadpool, as we kind of talk about in the Deadpool episode, gave the studio the confidence to go forward with an R-rated version of a character. And that is why March 2017 sequel to this film is Logan. It's specifically because of that, the tone that Hugh and Mangold bring, like all of that gave the studio confidence, because it did okay box office, but I think the reception and critical whatever 71%. I know that the discussion, or at least for me personally, has always been that this is such a improvement on X-Men Origins Wolverine and what they can do with the Wolverine character itself. And so since it made a good amount of money, it confirmed that all right, we'll make a sequel, and we'll talk more about that when we get to Logan. But yeah, so that's kind of the background of the film and some of the production notes. No real casting call outs. I mean, Brian T, who's is in this film, who was in, Tokyo Drift, and then Hiroki Sanada, who is a legend. But other than that, no one really to call out in the film itself, other than the post-credit scene, which the post-credit scene is awesome. I'll just start with the post-credit scene, that I love it. I think it's a great way to want, not only it's a wow factor, because at this point we all knew Days of Future Past was coming out next year, so the end credit scene ties to that, but the way that they did it was like cool to bring Professor X and Magneto back, so it's like a real like, oh shit, like this is awesome factor. And speaking of post-credit scenes, I don't know if this was a deleted post-credit scene or just a deleted scene from the film, but it takes place at the end. So after Wolverine and Yukio go on the private jet, she hands him like a case, and it's the classic Wolverine costume, like the yellow and blue that we're going to get in Deadpool and Wolverine. So that was always just like a fun thing that was cut from the film. And I wish, because up to that, even with Logan, we were like, I wish we just would have seen him in the classic costume, and then obviously we're getting it now. But I just thought that would have been a fun thing for them to do. So that's kind of all the background you need for the Wolverine, kind of fun things. And now I'll just share my thoughts on it. And so I have always regarded this film as being a good film, much better than Origins. Not a top X-Men movie, but it's one that I do enjoy. One I actually haven't revisited I have no idea how long. Maybe before Days of Future Past, like with kind of everything we're doing, or probably before Logan is the last time that I watch this movie from start to finish. Because when I think about this movie, I don't think like superhero movie. Like it's, even like the best, like the Batman. I still think of Batman and the Dark Knight and like all of that as a comic book movie. But I think because this one is just so serious, and I should, because of the third act is a very comic booky. But I not in a bad way that I don't think of it as not being a superhero film. It's just, I think it's just because it's so serious and like, half the movie is depressing. I just like, it doesn't really come to mind much. And I think because it truly does fly under the radar, because some of the themes that they attempt in this one are better done in Logan. And there's not even that great of action pieces. There's, the bullet train scene is iconic. I remember when the movie was coming out, that was in all the trailers. It was great. I forgot that he loses his power for a little bit he doesn't heal as quick. I forgot all of that. And even I do remember him losing his claws. But yeah, I just think that this is a pretty good movie that does start to fall apart towards the end and get into like the tropes of like a traditional comic book movie with the samurai outfit. But the way that they open the film in World War II with the bomb dropping and all of that was like, it's just so interesting of an approach to this character, because it's something they kind of attempted with Origins to show that opening, which I do love that opening. But there's no like emotional connection of them going through the war and living for so long, but then him saving this man's life when he was in a camp. It's just a really awesome way and kind of like jarring way to open the film with the dropping of the nuclear bomb and everything. So the opening is awesome. The one nitpick I had is when his like whole skin like melts off and it has to regrow. His hair also regrows. So can he not get a haircut? Like, if you know Wolverine's haircut situation, DM me or shoot the podcast a message. I'm curious. So the movie, I think the movie opens up great. It sets this, and then you get this loner and this continuation of X3, and I like that a lot. But as we always do, before I get into more of the stuff that I like, I'll talk about the things that I didn't like. There's not much, truly. It's a little slow, and it's building. It's slow in a sense, and I'm not saying it's like boring slow. It's just the pacing of the film is slow. When I think we're used to, not that the X-Men movies are high paced, but I think there's a lot more interesting elements going on, and a lot of this movie is him just dealing with the grief and the loss, and of having to kill Jean himself and constantly losing somebody. But then everything they do is great in this film. Like, all of these slower emotional moments are executed pretty perfectly, and they do a lot of cool things. So it's like a weird nitpick to like be like, it's just slow, but it's kind of necessary. I don't know. I think there's movies that do that and still you're like kind of gripped in. Maybe the first watch I was, but on a rewatch, I'm kind of like, okay, all these things that I'm seeing now, I think from a rewatch perspective, is that all these things I'm seeing now are just done better in the Wolverine. So I think that's kind of it. Like, it's a little bit long, could have been shorter. And then the third act, I think, is just, while it's cool, some of the action's cool, I don't think it's anything necessarily that we haven't seen before for Wolverine. Like, I didn't think in terms of that. Like, this film brings so much new that we haven't seen from Wolverine. Done well, anyway. Let me say done well. So I guess it's the weird, balance that the film makes. And then I feel like he has increased strength in this movie. Like, he's throwing people like so far. Maybe it was that way in the X-Men movies. I'm not sure. I don't remember Wolverine having that much additional strength, but maybe he does. What the hell do I know? So yeah, I think those are like the main nitpicks. I think it's a little drawn out. The end is a little wonky, but I think it does a lot well. And it just doesn't leave like a lasting impression on me. Like, like the first two X-Men films, and even Deadpool. Like I have a great time watching Deadpool, where this one is like, this is at times like this is a depressing watch, which, and I think it's a little bit too much of that, but it's done so well at moments, and then done even better in Logan. So I'm curious to see what my reaction will be once I get to Logan. But like it does grip you kind of right away with that beginning. You're seeing him alone when he goes into the bar with the poison arrow bit. Like that's great. I did like once Yukio gets there and takes him to Japan. There's a couple good moments of that, like the cleaning scene, like he's scrubbing getting scrubbed in a bathtub and like cleaning him and scrubbing him and then like freshening him up and like cutting his hair and everything. And then there's like a point where like Logan goes, "Oh no, I can do that area myself," or something like that. They got a really good laugh out of me. But this is where you're seeing is that the man he saved in World War II is dying and has basically spent all the company's money and his life trying to replicate I guess he followed Wolverine privately as an X-Men, or like, and seeing the adamantium and all that. And so he basically wants his healing factor and his adamantium. I think it's a cool story, and I think the idea of giving Wolverine that death that he is seeking is probably the only way to make a Wolverine movie interesting without it being repetitive, I guess, because then it's just like, all right, well, what's the threat? He dies. What's the threat? Somebody else he knows dies. So I think it's a good balance. I think it's done well. I think it's done really well here. Bullet train sequence is great. The Lovers Hotel is a good gag. And I think Kimiko's story for the Long Claw animal is much better than that bullshit that they told in X-Men Origins about the Wolverine. And I really think it's a great decision to continue this after X3. Like, it just makes the most sense, and you have this world build up. Things I really liked, too, about this movie was his look. His hair looks awesome. I think, and we see it again in Deadpool and Wolverine. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just a well-directed, well-acted, definitely well-acted. I think it's one of Hugh's better performances as the character. But like overall, it's a good film. I just think it's kind of forgettable. I don't think it's one people like to talk about that often or rewatch. I would be curious about that, like, because it's been logged 19,000 times on Letterboxd as that compares to Logan, which Logan's been reviewed and logged 61,000 times. So I just think it's a movie that people have seen. It's very forgettable. The rewatch value I don't think is high. I think it's a good, like, if you've never seen it, check it out. But then if you want to rewatch something like this, it's Logan. And I think that, and I know that I keep repeating that, but that's just what it seems like. It's like this is a good prelude into Logan and shows me that it kind of feels like when you look back at it, like the story itself is cool. The Japanese story is very cool and entertaining and interesting. But it kind of feels just like an audition tape to be able to do Old Man Logan, like, because it's some of the similar themes. But yeah, so that's basically all my thoughts on the Wolverine. I think it's a tremendous improvement over the previous Wolverine film and a much, much better portrayal of the character from Hugh. I think at times he feels like he's kind of phoned in Origins. And it's kind of gets the X-Men franchise along with First Class back to that original X-Men and X2 kind of level. It's a really good script, and like that different approach from the other films in the franchise kind of helps it feel like its own without super repetitive, I guess, until Logan. And it's just more narrative driven with an emphasis on the emotional aspects of the Wolverine and his kind of dealing with Jean. So it's kind of like everything you need and or want out of a Wolverine film before, like, this is, to me, like, I'm glad that if you want to include Origins, it's like Origins this, then Logan, because I don't think this is a character, I truly don't think this is a character that deserves its own film or trilogy, but he's great in an ensemble. So I think for them to be able to just pull it off alone is great. Again, the takeaways were just also the female, like I pointed out, Mangold put an emphasis on the female characters. They definitely feel like they're in their own, and they're great and kick ass and really cool characters too. But some of the other side characters kind of felt like replaceable, like Viper and stuff like that. But whatever. So yeah, that's my feelings on the Wolverine. In terms of my ranking, I would put this below Deadpool, but above Fantastic Four. And yeah, so let's see what some people had to say about the Wolverine on Letterboxd. So David Sims, who from Blank Check Podcast, said, yeah, the Viper character makes no sense. She spits acid. Who does she even work for? Why does she change into a sexy green outfit? And yeah, the climax is subpar, especially considering how nicely everything is built up. But it's still, talk about a blockbuster that has a terrific grasp on its characters and that keeps action intimate and that never gets too dark or cheesy. Which you can look at the poster for this movie and you would think it might be a soap opera drama. Like, it's just bad. Another review from somebody named Kim is that, honestly, this movie is not horrible, but man, why do they have to throw in the TMNT villain at the end? It's all going well until the end battle stinks. Someone gave it 2 stars and said, I don't have anything to say because that's how much I don't care about this movie. Somebody did say Seven Samurai meets Marvel in a decent way. Kind of weird that this was all a dream in his head. And then one last one from Sophie that said, the Wolverine walk so that Logan could run. This film is better than I remember, but not by much. Despite taking place after the events of X-Men The Last Stand, the film attempts to distance itself from the rest of the X-Men characters and focus solely on the Wolverine character. This feels very different from all previous films, and this allows for the best portrayal of Wolverine's character that we have seen so far, and Hugh delivers his best. This person enjoyed the pacing in the film because although it is a fast-paced action film, which I might disagree, it wasn't afraid to slow things down and develop the characters and the relationships between them. So yeah, it's pretty much the same feeling everybody has. Kind of forgettable. It sets up Logan very nicely. But yeah, if you want to follow me on Letterboxd, you can follow along with what I watch and what I'm reviewing. It's RPW1118, I believe. Remember to check out our Redbubble and TeePublic stores and get some merch if you want. But thank you for listening. If I was repetitive at points, I'm sorry. Doing solo episodes is weird sometimes. And I hope that you are enjoying with us these films and enjoying the episodes and getting pumped for Deadpool and Wolverine, man. This movie is going to be a lot of fun. And I can't wait for that. So follow us on the socials and remember to rate, like, and subscribe. All right, thanks, guys.